Hi there. Welcome to the next section of Let's Talks. And today we have Teresa Quinlan, and she is an industry leader with extensive work in like human resource management and along with consulting towards like emotional intelligence. So let's go straight to Teresa, and we can request her to have her brief intro before we start the formal interview question and answer. Over to you, Teresa. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the invitation. It's really great to be here. This topic it's an exceptional topic to dig into. There's lots of avenues that we can take with it. Part of my passion around it is, of course, being able to arm people with skills and strategies that they can use straight away that have a positive impact on their life.
Okay. So if we talk about emotional intelligence, so what exactly is emotional intelligence and what exactly emotional intelligence is not? Because sometimes we'll say, oh, I'm too much emotional, and I take decisions while I'm emotionally in a scenario. So how will you define it, and what are some borderlines where we should stop?
Yeah, so it's really interesting to be able to think of emotions as, having borders to them. And really the distinction would be in, do we have the skill set to navigate even the most challenging emotions that live within the human experience? Because sort of the polarity is the experience as a human being. We have the opportunity to have all emotions. We happen to be somewhat feeling creatures with the capacity to think.
Yeah.
But perhaps we rather believe ourselves to be really intellectual thinking beings that have the capacity to feel. And that can get us into trouble a little bit. So if we maybe admit a little bit more that we are emotional, there's nothing good or bad about that. It just is. Okay. And learning how to understand and master our emotions is what our emotional intelligence is. So we have many intelligences. Emotional intelligence is one of them. We have, also kinesthetic, logical, mathematical, linguistic, musical intelligence, and they all originate in the same place. They're all on our brain. It's all in our brain.
Right.
We tend to have some natural and nurtured aptitude across intelligences. So some skills we come by, learn, and demonstrate really easily and at a high proficiency. And other skills, it's the opposite. They're harder for us to learn and they're harder for us to have aptitude around. But that goes the same in math as an intelligence. For some people, it came quite naturally. For others, it's really quite difficult. And so emotional intelligence is similar in that aspect. Essentially, it's the intersection of where our emotions and our cognition meet. And it's about developing skills in two key areas: personal competency, so the skills of self-mastery, and then social competency, the skills that help us navigate often complex interactions with others.
Amazing. Okay. So when you say about the competency and also the skills, so how this emotional intelligence applies to an individual or an organization?
Well, research kind of points in many directions to the value of investing. Why should we develop our emotional intelligence? And most prominent is that it increases our capacity for resilience, so we can manage difficult stuff. Motivation, so we have a spark to move to action and do. Empathy, understanding the perspective of other people. Reasoning, having robust logic. Stress management and communication. And then when we think beyond sort of our individual capacities into team capacities, it's the ability to read and navigate a wide range of social situations and conflict. And that is most beneficial because within teams and organizations, a lack of these things means we're going to waste time and energy and money. So it gets really expensive when we're constantly in conflict, when we don't have trust, when we can't unite in a vision or a commitment, when we don't hold others accountable. It gets really expensive when we're not doing those types of things.
I see. So, with your experience, you must have, being the industry guru, you must have evaluated or must spoken to a lot of organizations. So, what are like top one or two or three significant components of emotional intelligence and two of three drivers that are actually stopping the organization to mature?
It's a good question because it isn't always the same. However, there will be elements that are consistent across organizations. And the first place we generally have to start is we have to start with self-mastery skills, because every individual, no matter the position they hold in an organization, has to arrive as a really strong individual contributor. And if I happen to be at an executive level and I have no self-mastery skills in emotional intelligence, I become really toxic to the culture. As an executive, I set the tone of culture for an organization. So if my behaviors are disruptive, I essentially give permission for everyone else's behaviors to also be disruptive. And so it's really essential within an organization to ensure that we have great self-mastery skills at our most powerful positions, so that our culture is conducive to things like trust and psychological safety, innovation, growth, motivation, all of those kinds of things that we hear as buzzwords in organizations, but then we recognize are really difficult to actually have happen.
And have you witnessed any organization that has like a scorecard or KPIs for monitoring the emotional intelligence? Because generally we do, when we go through the organizations and they have a lot of KPIs. So what is the retention percentage? What is acquisition percentage? What is the percentage of those? Blah blah blah. But from emotional intelligence, to my limited experience, I haven't seen any scorecard or KPI from HR perspective. Is there something where organizations are still lagging behind, or it's there but quantitatively it's very hard, so they don't focus, or it's not so much important that organizations are not considering it?
All of the above. All of the above. And so more often than not, what happens when organizations will engage with me and we start talking about KPIs, because we want to return on investment. If we're going to invest in emotional intelligence development, we want to know what the return is going to be on that. And so we need to have metrics in place to be able to say, here's your return on that investment. More often we'll see about a 1 to 27 return on investment when we push money and dollars and time into emotional intelligence. And that's a pretty big return on investment. And part of the problem is, one, we don't have KPI language for emotional intelligence that currently exists in an organization. More often, the company puts this under their values, and then our measurement of is someone living our values is a very subjective measurement rather than an objective quantitative measurement. And yet we can measure it quantitatively. They're just not measuring it quantitatively. And so what I help organizations do is find the language first, then the skills, and then how do we measure the skill? And we start implementing that into their performance management, annual measurement tools. And we also start putting a dollar amount to it. So one of the things many organizations will measure is employee engagement. There's a percentage that comes with that. Well, employee engagement has many things that they're measuring, and under those many things will be emotional intelligence skills at play. And so we just have to talk the language back, and then we can start to observe emotional intelligence skills in action. So I would be able to give an objective measurement to watching an employee do or not do certain behaviors that indicate they have or don't have emotional intelligence.
So you just mentioned a couple of things, and two questions just came to my mind. The first part is like, what are the interrelationship of all the variables you just talked about? So these relationships, are these like constant relationships when you talk from like one industry to the other industry, like for telecom to finance to retail? So for emotional intelligence remains the same for, well, that is the first question. And the second question is that since you said that there's some investment and then return of investment becomes very subjective whether to determine. So are organizations investing more on the strategic level, like the leadership level? They feel more comfortable to invest on the emotional intelligence on like top level, because once they invest at the top level, it goes down the road, or they are talking down the ladder, it's like bottom to down. So what are your perspective on that? Maybe I don't know whether that makes sense or not. I would like two questions that just came to my mind.
Yes, great questions. I mean, so the first one is, emotional intelligence is emotional intelligence. And so its applications are really robust and broad. Once you learn the skills, you can apply it to anything. So whether you're in sales or leadership, parenting, relationship management, like anything, it can apply
Anything,
to.
okay.
And so really it's about understanding the skill itself and how then you apply it to the situation that's in front of you. But it's also about recognizing what skill do I need in this moment. So
Mhm.
like a golfer has a bag of clubs. If they pull the wrong club tool out of their bag, the ball is not going to go where they need it to go.
Yeah.
Right? So essentially, emotional intelligence is about developing a set of skills and then
Mhm.
recognizing in the situation I'm in, which skill do I need to be using in this moment to achieve the outcome we're aiming for? Whether the outcome is resolving a conflict, coming up with probable solutions to a really complex problem, navigating performance management, doesn't really matter.
I see. I see.
Right? So oftentimes in assessing an organization, we will be able to determine as a team what are the top 3 skills amongst the team that they're using well, proficiently, and what are the bottom 3 skills that they're not, that are probably causing them problems. And then we would look at developing the most critical skills for them to flourish as a team. Now, if that team has priority skills to execute on, like if it's a sales team, the skills to be a great salesperson are different than the skills necessary to be a great relationship or customer client manager or to be a great leader. And so what we'd want to make sure we're doing is we're also focusing on the correct skills for the metrics that we need to accomplish.
Got it. Okay,
Okay?
makes sense. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And one another thing is that most of the times I try. Sometimes I say I'm a resource, like I'm at a middle management level, and I heavily invested on emotional intelligence. But due to my, and maybe it might be related to your the way you have to respond to a certain stimulus or maybe scenario, and maybe anything that my manager or my leader is coming up, and I'm not. So sometimes the company has invested a lot, and I've invested a lot, but due to us an unanticipated personal issue like at home or some special situation at the personal level, sometimes that becomes a blockage towards like the sporting as per the expected outcome from a vote. So do you think that does happen, that some personal limitations become a blocker, or personal versus block professional, or no?
Absolutely. I mean, though, it's pretty hard for us to leave parts of ourselves elsewhere. Like when we talk about bringing our whole self to work, essentially what that means is all of me comes with me wherever I go.
Okay.
When we develop emotional intelligence skills, we learn strategies behind compartmentalizing experiences we're having so they don't bleed into other areas of our life.
Okay.
Sometimes this can be considered a really unhealthy strategy. And the reason it can be unhealthy is because we do it for everything and we never open up the package again. So we just compartmentalize and shove everything away or sweep it under the rug and we never deal with it.
Mhm.
And so what ends up happening is we're just sort of a bundle of stress, or we become numb to our own emotions and we're very reactive and non-responsive.
I see.
However, if we learn how to use compartmentalization or reappraisal or other strategies really effectively, then if we're having a difficult time at home, we would know how to manage that area of our life so it doesn't bleed negatively into our performance in the workplace.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So workspace and issues and personal issues, you need to have a segregation to have an optimal performance. Okay.
Well,
So
they don't need to have one. We need
yeah.
strategies so that we're aware of what our peak performance is and we're doing what is necessary as an individual. So it's really called radical personal responsibility. It's meaning like I have something going on in my life that when I come to work, it's interfering with my performance at work. But here I'm at work. These people have paid me to do a job. And if I'm underperforming, are they paying me less when I underperform? No, they're not.
Yeah.
So I really have radical personal responsibility to show up in peak performance, which means I need to have strategies to manage my emotions, essentially manage my well-being so I can be in peak performance.
Thank you. I learned a new buzzword today, radical personal performance.
Yes, good one.
Good one, thank you. Okay, what are some pillars of emotional intelligence if we talk about?
So related to performance, there are 4 pillars within emotional intelligence that are more directly related to our well-being. However, we can all relate to the fact that when we're in a state of wellness, we generally perform better. We access our intellect, we have better reasoning and critical thinking skills, better collaboration skills, better conflict. We just have better skills across the board when we're in a state of wellness. And it doesn't take long to sort of reflect on our own experiences that when we've been in a state of flow, as described by, what's his name, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, that state is often considered peak performance. And the relationship to well-being comes from 4 pillars of emotional intelligence: self-regard, which is having a healthy belief in ourself, living by our value system, understanding our strengths and our weaknesses, and just holding a level of healthy esteem and humility.
Okay.
Then self-actualization is our willingness to learn and grow and really create a life for ourselves that is meaningful and fulfilling. So that means we dedicate time and energy to things that are meaningful to us, and we continually expand our comfort zone of growth.
Makes sense. Okay.
The third piece is optimism. So that's, how do we view the world? Do we view through a lens of positivity, abundance, and hope, or the opposite to that? And generally it's a sliding scale. In states of wellness, we generally do see through a lens of greater optimism, but in states of unwellness, it's harder. Our negativity bias sort of rears its ugly head, and we see more scarcity and what's not there and who's done, we do more blaming and shaming. And then the fourth piece is our interpersonal relationships. So the quality of our relationships of harmony and meaning and fulfillment, contribute to our wellness. And so when we have really solid relationships, which also help us to disperse stress, we can be in greater states of well-being, which elevates our ability to perform.
Okay, so we had 4 pillars. So one is like the self regard, actualization, optimization, and the last is the harmonization, right? So where does empathy comes in?
Empathy is a skill in emotional intelligence.
Okay.
It's also a personality trait. Like, to be an empath is a personality trait. And so some people have a natural tendency to feel and understand what other people are experiencing at a very deep emotional level. Other people don't have that level of proficiency naturally. And so they have to cultivate the skill of empathy, which is part of our interpersonal realm. It helps us to connect to other people. And it's basically understanding someone's perspective, their experience, the emotions they're having, and the impact of those to them.
Okay.
Developing that skill can be quite difficult for individuals, especially if the ego tends to be quite prominent.
Okay, and one more question. Sorry, I'm just asking more and more, but
Sure.
when we say this, the feeling of the sense of gratitude. So people always say that I'm trying to be. You should be gratitude. You should have a skill of being more gratitude towards other, right? So gratitude comes with the kindness, and kindness comes with like your way, how you meet or greet people, or how you actually accomplish things. So is there any overlap of gratitude with like emotional intelligence, or is there any relationship between them?
Yes, absolutely. So when we're working on developing our emotional self-awareness, and when we're working on our stress management skills, like being flexible, optimistic, then gratitude can be a daily habit that is used to help rewire our brain, to minimize negativity bias and amplify positivity bias, basically, to be able to look for what's possible and have a positive outlook that we can positively influence the outcome of whatever we're experiencing. So if I happen to have a personal goal that I've set and I lack in optimism, then I probably won't make any efforts towards achieving that goal. If I start to implement a daily practice of gratitude, then I'm going to elevate how often I look at things that I have, people in my life, abundance, and that will cultivate healthy emotions around stress management. So in all likelihood, I'll start to look at myself from a greater seat of awareness to what are my strengths. And I tap into those strengths and use them to solve whatever goals or problems are in front of me. So that practice is actually really healthy as part of daily habits that contributes to emotional well-being.
Makes sense. Okay. Last two questions, and I think we are running out of time as well. So the second last question is that let's say if I come to you and you are like just like a guru of emotional intelligence. So how will you evaluate me, or what questions you ask me generally, or what you look at me? It is my face, it's my expressions, it's my smile. Definitely being a guru or industry leader, you must have a sense of just looking at the people. So how will you judge that? Or are you going to question me some couple of things? How will you identify where I am from a grid perspective of where, from let's say grade perspective, 1 to 10, maybe I'm at a 5, 6, 7.
So I'm a practitioner of the EQI 2.0, which is the most robust, valid, reliable, and widely used emotional intelligence assessment. So we can use the assessment and actually find out exactly what your skills are. And we can use it as a self-assessment, meaning you're only assessing your skill set based on 138 questions geared around behaviors. Or we can use it in a 360 manner, which we have you answer to self-assess, and then we have other individuals who know you also assess you. So if you're a leader, they would be direct reports and peers and your manager, but we could also have your friends and family and members of maybe clients or customers that know you well also assessing you, because then what we pick up on as a leader is blind spots.
I see.
And sometimes we overestimate our skill set and sometimes we underestimate our skill set. So it's important to navigate both of those. So that's one way of assessing, is to use the actual assessment. When I'm working with clients, we talk about experiences. What are you experiencing? What are you running up against that is challenging for you? And we start to dissect and pick apart what's happening. Now, in the expression of that, there will be physical cues of someone's emotional wellness. There will also be words that people use when they talk about how they handled things. And I'm listening to all of these to create the picture of what skills they are using well and what skills they aren't using well. And that's how we navigate what practices and exercises for self-discovery do we have to do first. And then what strategies do they have to learn and then implement on the job or in their personal life to be able to have a skill, because skill only comes out of continued practice.
Right. Okay. Amazing. Last question, thank you very much, is that if a person is like human resource professional, what path will you adopt? Will you guide them if they want to excel into emotional intelligence? That's a question for the people. And after that, if you can just highlight what are your products and services, and if anyone want to contact you, how you can help or like mentor them or do one-to-one something like coaching as well, to make sure from organization perspective to the human, to the independent individual perspective, how you can help them in grooming. That is the last one.
So, when any organization that wants to bring emotional intelligence in can do it in multiple ways, of course. The first is to connect with a professional in the space of emotional intelligence to be able to have a discovery conversation. And in part, that discovery conversation is going to be able to get to the root cause of what are the problems that are being experienced and what are the desired outcomes that they want to have within their organization. And from that, there's probably going to be a multifaceted approach. So there will be executive coaching and leadership development, and then employee development of these skills.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
The great thing is there are abundant resources available around emotional intelligence. I highly recommend working with a professional in that space, because they do all the legwork for you. They sort through all of it and ensure you get what you need and implement it properly.
Perfect. Okay. So I think that's it for now. It was wonderful to have you, and looking forward for another session on another with the same topic, but some different questions. I will request you to be part of the next session as well. Thank you for your time. It was wonderful. Any last comments from your side?
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to engage in the conversation.
Thank you very much.